Good evening and welcome. I also wish to welcome those of you who are watching from home. I'm Nancy Huey, part of the St. Vincent de Paul Bereavement Ministry. We have been blessed in this parish over and over again because of the graciousness and expertise of those at Harry Hines Hospice. Because of our past experiences with them, it was the logical thing to ask them if they could help our community after Father Kent's death. Their immediate answer was yes. So on behalf of the parish, I would like to welcome Father Tom Welk, chaplain for Harry Hines Hospice, who has been with us before for a couple of workshops on our last best gifts, and Rita Hayes Newton, who facilitates our monthly grief support groups, as well as Seasons of the Heart and Caring for the Holidays. I will now turn the evening over to Rita and Father Tom. Yes. Thank you. I don't know what I'm doing.
If you'd like to follow along, the words are in the first leaflet. Be not afraid. You shall cross the barren desert, but you shall not die of thirst. You shall wander far in safety, though you do not know the way. You shall speak your words in foreign lands, and all will understand. You shall see the face of God and be not afraid. I go before you always. Come, follow me, and I will give you rest. If you pass through raging waters in the sea, you shall not drown. If you walk amid the burning flames, you shall not be harmed. If you stand before the power of hell, and death is at your side, know that I am with you through it all. Be not afraid. I go before you always. Come, follow me, and I will give you rest.
Hi, my name is Rita Haynes Newton, and I have worked at Harry Hines Memorial Hospice for 22 years, half of that time doing patient care and half of it in the bereavement department. And I have been fortunate enough to be able to come out to St. Vincent's, 2 or 3 times a year to lead out in our Seasons of the Heart series. And now we come out once a month to do our Companions in Grief, the second Tuesday of the month in the morning. So I really appreciate the ministry of your church here, your grief committee. So earlier this summer, Angie Urinda informed me that Father Kent was ill, and she had asked if we would come out later on to see how all of you are coping. And I have to confess, as you all know, that's very shocking news. So, of course, we said, sure, we'll be out. So our purpose this evening is to give you the opportunity to talk in small groups, and if you want to share, even for those who are at home listening, how you're feeling and coping with Father Kent's death. And I'm told that sharing is something that you're familiar with because you do it at life events, so you can talk in groups of two or turn around and talk over the row in between you with those behind you. And I just want to acknowledge the effect of the coronavirus actually on everything that we're doing in life now, but it's really affected our ability to grieve as we normally do as a community or as a family. We can't meet together because gatherings are limited. We can't get close, or we're not supposed to really get close and touch each other. We're socially distanced, the 6 feet apart. We're wearing masks, and we have a valid fear of catching this illness. So I appreciate all of you who have come out this evening and those who are live streaming at home wanting to be a part of this. So just want to start with the word grief. It's such a heavy word, and grief actually starts before a death occurs. We look at grief beginning when we're given a life-threatening diagnosis of an illness. It intensifies as we're told that this illness is terminal and that we're appropriate for hospice care. And then it can reach a peak when death is imminent and one is dying. So sometimes this process can take years, because sometimes you get a diagnosis of an illness like COPD, which is a lung disease, and that can last for years, or heart disease can last for years. And other times, you only have a few days or a few weeks to cope with a life-threatening illness and to try and wrap your mind around what's happening. I always think of that process when we have a short period of time, is that the illness is so far ahead of us that we can't even catch up. We're just trying to cope with the news, let alone cope with what needs to be done next and all the changes that are occurring with someone as they are going through this illness, or as we ourselves are going through this illness. And that's what it seems to me that you've been coping with Father Kent's illness and death, is that the illness was so far ahead that you didn't even have time to catch up, to even deal with things. Things happened so quickly. His announcement of having pancreatic cancer, it had metastasized, and seeing the changes in him from week to week. And I'm thinking, from what you had mentioned to me, that you really only had 2 months before he died, from when he made this announcement at the end of May, I believe, and then he died July the 22nd. That is not a very long time at all. Things happen so suddenly. And a lot of times our minds have to be able to process and accept so that we can move forward. And when things happen that suddenly, we don't have that opportunity until a death has occurred, and then we're going back to figure out, how did that happen so fast? What was going on? So for our first small group breakout, I have a couple of questions for you to talk about, and we'll take about 6 to 8 minutes to talk with each other about that. How did you feel when Father Kent announced that he had pancreatic cancer? And what was your reaction to the change in his physical appearance from week to week? So let's take a few minutes and we'll start that process. And I think you could turn around or you could talk across if you find a group to visit with. Yes. Okay. Okay. I had to figure out how do you turn that off once it starts working. I got it though. I don't know if anyone would like to share any of their reactions out loud, or do you feel just comfortable within your small group? It's just up to you. And it's okay either way. Okay, we'll keep it within the small groups then. Okay. So I would imagine that some of you were pretty shocked and maybe kind of upset and angry, or just kind of sitting in unbelief. How could this be happening? So our next section that we're going to visit about is going to be about grief and what is normal, because grief affects us in many ways. It affects us physically, cognitively or mentally, emotionally, physically. It affects our behavior even sometimes. So I like to tell people who are grieving that grief is uncomfortable because we just don't want to deal with it a lot of times. And so a lot of times we're anxious to just move out of grief before we've even had a chance to process things. So, but even if we don't want to acknowledge our grief, grief is normal. It's what we have to do to keep on going. We must grieve. If you don't grieve, you can become ill. People have become ill if they don't acknowledge their grief. So one of the things I brought, which we'll have out in the foyer afterward, is a handout on normal grief experiences, and that will review some of the signs of grief. So when we're grieving, our life is out of balance. It's like when you lose someone, it's like having a mobile, the old mobiles you put over a crib, and if you cut off a piece of it, it would just be out of balance, moving. And so our life is that way when we're grieving, because someone that we love is not there. And so we have a hard time just finding a place to land. We may have physical symptoms, which would be not sleeping well, not having an appetite. Some of us will never lose our appetites. So we overeat. We're just trying to fill that void. We're tired. We're fatigued. We don't have energy. We could become more anxious or more depressed, or have anxiety for the first time, feel panicky, because we're just not sure what life should be at this point in time. Sometimes we have GI symptoms with our stomach. I always say that's because your stomach has its own nervous system. It's not always the mind telling the stomach what's going on. The stomach is back up to the mind saying, don't send any food down here, we just can't handle it. We may feel nauseated. So we can even feel like our chest hurts. And I always caution people, you should check with your doctors, but sometimes our hearts are just breaking. So that's what we could feel physically, emotionally, the sadness, depression. Loss of concentration goes back up there with kind of the physical symptoms. And then we're forgetful. I always think that we have so much going on in our minds that things don't really get in well before we forget them. So sometimes we may just feel like we're walking around in a fog. We may start crying easily, unexpectedly. Those tears may come out of nowhere. And church is a common place for that to happen because of the familiarity of not seeing Father Ken up front, you know? Or the songs that we're singing a lot of times can bring up those feelings as well. So that's normal. I know sometimes people have a hard time returning to church in normal times. Now we have COVID on top of that, so it's hard to feel like, you know, coming, I don't know, every day to Mass or Sunday or Saturday evening. So that happens normally, let alone while we're going through this pandemic. We may have mood swings. We may want to be around people and can't be around people, so we're trying to call people. Hopefully you're staying in touch with each other. Sometimes we don't want to be bothered with people. Just kind of back and forth, back and forth. Not quite sure what it is that I want now. Sometimes we get so overwhelmed with our feelings, we may feel like we're going crazy. So those are normal grief symptoms. And even though they're uncomfortable, whenever I always tell folks, you can take this sheet, you can check off how you're feeling for a day, put it on your refrigerator, and say, I'm normal for grief. I'm normal for grief. So in our second group discussion, what feelings of grief have you been experiencing here lately? So we'll take 6 or 7 minutes to discuss that, okay? Okay. Am I giving you enough time, though, to be able to visit? Okay, very good, very good. Yes.
I was saying that already, so our grief was here already,
Mm-hmm.
and then COVID has brought it double.
Right.
We've been isolated and we've been alone.
Mm-hmm.
We used to call people, and I just said, I don't have too much energy.
Right. So Nancy was mentioning that her grief is up here, and with COVID, it's doubled. It's way up high, and everyone's been so isolated that you're. It's hard to just cope. You're emotionally you're fatigued too.
I'm contrasting that to Lydia E. Terry Coleman and his funeral last year, and the place was packed. Yeah. And we could all visit and cry. And then we had the lunch, and the next day it was more and cry and share stories. And we had none of that.
So, contrasting to a funeral last year of, who was it, Terry? Terry Coleman? Pullman. And the place was packed, and everyone could visit and cry together and then tell stories. The meal was held the next day, so you could come back and have more of that process going, and we just haven't had any of that. Mm-hmm. Right. This COVID, I think, especially now, if you have funerals in a church, you can have in Kansas. I say that in Kansas because I was in a funeral out of town. We could only have 22 people in the church. That was it. So here you can have more people at the funeral, but still we have distance. We wear masks. We really aren't serving dinners anymore. That whole ritual that we go through has really been disrupted. So, yeah.
Even deciding whether or not to go to this vigil or mass.
Mm-hmm.
We can't have a moral thing because of COVID. Should I be one of the people to go, or is there somebody else who had, it was just so hard.
No, but you're bringing up things that we have to think about now, and so I'll repeat that best as I can remember. Making a decision: should I come to the funeral or not attend the funeral? Because of COVID, it's almost a moral decision, where it wasn't before. So it's that thing of what should I do, because we're living in some uncertain times now as well. So add that on top of what we call normal grief. Normally we can feel that way. And now it's twice as hard. So, yes. So coping, how are we going to get through this process? Because everything's different now. How do we get back on track? And I'm not quite sure with COVID that we're going to have the normal that we used to have. It's not going to be around soon, we'll put it like that, with the numbers increasing. So we're not able to do what we want to do, be around folks, talk to people, cry together, laugh together, tell stories together. One thing I like to recommend to people when you're grieving is that you have to take care of yourself, which is hard to do. We're just talking about basic things: eating nutritious meals 2 or 3 times a day, exercising if you can, sleeping as well as you can, because these are things that are affected when we're grieving, our appetite, our sleep pattern, having energy to even want to exercise, talking with others by phone. I say by phone because we may not be able to get out and visit the way we used to. Acknowledging our loss, acknowledging that you've had a loss and that it was an important loss. Remember that grief is a process. It's not something that we're going to get over, in 2 weeks or 2 months. I was just counting, and I think we need to realize it's only been 3 months since Father Kent died. From July to October, that's only been 3 months. That's not very long at all. I mean, he was your priest here for what, 9 years? That's a long time. That's a long time. So, coping. We have to be patient with ourselves, and we have to realize that this is not going to be something that we are just going to pop up from, and that's okay. It's okay to not feel like I'm just done and I'm on my merry way, because we're not there yet. We're not there. So, for our third group discussion, the question is, what are some of the things that you miss about Father Kent? What are some of the things that you miss the most about him? I hate to interrupt because it sounds like you're really enjoying your time together visiting. But we'll kind of come back together. So, what does healing look like? And you all just participated in a healing exercise, sharing memories. You know, your relationship with grief will change over time. But because grief comes in waves, it comes in cycles, it's up and down like a roller coaster. People feel like we're going to start with this stage of grief, and then we're going to march right on through to acceptance. And grief does not work that way. We're up and down, up and down. Sometimes we feel like, okay, I'm through with this. And then out of nowhere, those feelings hit us again. And we're wondering, what's going on? I thought I was all done with that. But your relationship with grief will change over time because it's very intense right now. And as time goes on, that intensity should decrease for normal grief. We will have, a wave of grief, but it won't be as big as it was before. Or maybe it'll happen around significant dates. Certain things that you remember about Father Kent, maybe at the holidays. The holidays are always hard. I'll just preface that right now. The holidays are hard. They're coming up. They're going to be different because we have COVID that we're dealing with as well. So one of the things we like to talk about is making an accommodation for your grief, not just acceptance, because acceptance or closure makes it seem like, okay, well, I'm done. I've gotten through my grief and I'm done. But the reality is that you're always going to miss that person in your life. And so we make an accommodation by putting our coping skills into practice. Maybe if we're having a hard day, we acknowledge that. Maybe if we come to church and we sing a song and the tears come down, that's okay. We're not going to beat ourselves up about it. So we learn to live with grief and incorporate our coping skills. And then we will find out, we talk about stug moments, which are subsequent temporary upsurges in your grief that can happen. These are these grief bursts that tend to come out of nowhere sometimes, where you just are fine and then all of a sudden you just maybe, I understand Father Kent liked to bicycle, maybe you see someone bicycling and then it just evokes an emotion and you start crying. The word I like to key in on is that's temporary, maybe temporary. Our grief is not, it's not like going on for days or, like we may have initially. It's less time. So, healing. So one of the things that we brought with us will be out in the foyer, are memory stones. And there's stones that you can take one with you and you can keep it in your pocket and recall memories. And so those are for you as well. So our last question is, how has your grief changed from when you first heard about Father Kent until now? Where do you feel like you're at right now? And we haven't had a lot of time pass, so it may feel like, well, I haven't gotten any further along than when I first heard about it. But when you think about going back to when you first heard that announcement about his illness, where our grief starts when we get that bad news, so to speak, and where you're at now. Maybe visit a little bit about where am I now?
Well, you know, I don't. He was. Always what? Oh, yeah. But it did. The father and mine just quit. But often enough, I'd be at the meeting with father again. And I'd say something that I just thought was hilarious. And I'd be laughing. And I think he was very concrete. Because I'd be, oh, and he'd be like, what? But we're saying, our Lord's a couple. I just, gosh, well, I don't know.
we're going to come back again before Tom comes up to share. So you all have gone from getting bad news, that's where our grief is starting, getting that first bad news throughout the illness and the death of Father Kent, and have had to cope with all these changes and how it is affecting your life as well as your community here in church. I just wanted to ask, does anyone want to share anything about how they're feeling or they feel like how they've come through this process? I'll reinterpret it so we're not passing back and forth. Mm-hmm. Right, you're grieving and you haven't let go. Right, that.
Like if you lose a spouse, you don't have another spouse stepping in. You to take their place.
Right,
We love this priest. Now we have a new one.
right.
I don't know.
Got married too soon.
Okay, so the conversation for those who can't hear is that we had Father Kent and we miss him and we're not finished grieving, and now we have a new priest, Father Ken. Very, very similar names here too, and things are different, and we haven't had time to adjust is what I'm hearing you say. So
You know, I hadn't thought about that, but that's really a powerful point.
Yeah, I mean, we not only love, I mean, if you lose your spouse, you lose that person also. But we also, in a way, lost the underpinnings of our faith community.
mhm,
His being dead.
okay.
That makes sense. I mean, it
Let-
changed this faith community.
Right. It's made a change in your faith community. So the analogy was like if you lose a spouse, you don't get another spouse. Most people don't, at least. In a few weeks, you know. And so this is different now, and the faith community is different. And so we know that things would have to change, but it's been kind of sooner than what we're ready for, maybe.
You might remind that if you're talking about, you brought up, this is really a very brief period of time. 3 months is this is when the reality really sinks in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to discourage you, but if you're looking at that, correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of the normal process of grief and then the healing process, you kind of bottom out at about, what, 6 months?
6 months, yes.
So I'm sorry, but yeah, you're exactly right. So in terms of moving back up the curve for the healing, you may well have to be patient with yourself as individuals and as a parish.
Mm-hmm.
But the process, I hope tonight, 3 months is a good time to start in terms of getting out, talking about it, being more public with it. Because now you feel somewhat that you're able to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Not really getting distraught to the point of not being able to do and share.
Right. So just to repeat, because we're live streaming too, is that we have to be reminded that we're only 3 months out, not a very long period of time. And so usually when we look at when you're hitting the bottom, we're looking at 6 months. That's kind of when that reality of they're not coming back, and we are moving on.
Can you hear me? I have the microphone, I don't think it's on. But I mentioned, remember visiting with an individual who had a terrible time, he lost his wife. And so he asked for an appointment, this is before Rita came along, and did the work he does now, it was on my shoulders somewhat. So I visited with him, and I kind of tried to remember when his wife died, I can manage it. So it gave him some hope. So it's not like we're going to take it away by explaining it, but we normalize it. That makes sense? That don't feel you're losing it because this is going on with you as a parish or you as an individual. It doesn't necessarily be the cure-all, but knowing that the light is getting brighter, there's hope at the end of all of this, keeps us working, keeps us moving ahead.
So I will let you come.
I gave my speech already, I'm
No.
done. Most of you know me well enough. Please don't believe everything I say in this setting. Now, what I start saying now, I hope you can believe. I think I'm okay with the lavalier, so I'm going to let you have this. And again, those of you who have come to the workshop that I presented here, and I always really appreciate coming to this community. You have such a spirit and such aliveness, and you interact so well that it really makes it easy to relate to you and to communicate with you. Just a couple of things to tie together where Rita came from and where I will be going, kind of a bridge here. I'm not going to give you technical things. I'm going to be more reflective in my comments. But a couple of things just to make that bridge. You know, as you were talking, introducing the last session about grief kind of comes and goes, and it goes in waves, it can also sneak up on you at unexpected times. About a year ago, I was giving a workshop, and I forget the exact context, but somehow, some way, I was weaving in my little dog, a Shih Tzu, pronouncing it correctly. Sometimes she was a Shih Tzu, but Shih Tzu. That's how it's mispronounced, right? So anyway, it'd been about a year and a half, and I really missed that little pup. You know, I got her when she was a little tiny thing, 6 weeks old, and I got some pictures out, and then she thought she was a person. You know, we could talk about losses and spouse. I don't want to equate necessarily, but you know losing a pet can be difficult. So Miss Bailey, after 17 years, had to go home to doggy heaven, and I was relating that, and all of a sudden, boom, I started crying. You know, it just sneaked up on me. I never expected that to happen. But the group was there. They really all understood. So I just took some time to collect myself and then move on. So this is going to be happening in a year? No. And I think the other thing you said was, we never, this is C.S. Lewis says this too. You know, we think we get over grief. No, folks, we never get over it. And he uses the analogy of, and I've had an appendectomy, you know, so I had an appendicitis, they took it out, and this is before the laparoscope, I got a nice little scar here. So he says, you have an appendectomy, and you look down there, it doesn't affect your life as you go on. But what about if you've lost a limb, an arm or a leg? Do you ever get over that? No. What do you learn to do? You learn how to adjust, how to move on with the loss of that very important part of your functioning. So I think we need to frame this also in terms of how do we get to the point of where we can adjust and we can move on? Because things will be different. There's no question about that. They're going to be different for you. So that's kind of the bridge comments where Rita was, so get more to the reflective part. And I'm going to start where you started too, when Kent realized what was going on and how he had to wrestle with that. He had to come to terms with it. And I had several conversations with him. As you well know, he came under the care of our program, which he called in. He initiated it. He did all of that. I worked with him. But I also got permission, because we have to respect confidentiality very, very closely. So without that permission, I could not share those comments that he shared with me on that journey. One of the things he had to wrestle with very painfully was, what direction do I go in terms of treatment here? I don't know if you're aware of that, because he was pushed pretty strongly. And Bishop Kemi had actually sent out some letters in which he had met with Father Kent and encouraged him to pursue the aggressive curative. So I took on that role with him as he wrestled with that question. And one of the points that we really talked about was, what's the treatment going to do for you, the aggressive curative treatment? Because as you well know, pancreatic cancer is a nasty one. About the only way I can describe it very quickly. I better watch my time. I can get carried away, as you well know. She's going to set an alarm for me and set it as loud as it can go. No, I watch my time pretty closely. I'll just have to worry about that thing going off and getting in my way when you set it on. But anyway, so what's that going to do for you? Well, buy some time. No question about that. And so we debated, what kind of time will it be? Because you know well, too, you get aggressive curative treatment, it's going to have some side effects. Some people want to go that route. They want the extra time because they need it. They need the extra time. It was a little bit like, I think I shared the story with you at the workshop. I walk into this woman's room, a hospice patient, and the first thing she said to me was, "Thank God for cancer." You got to get a little wrinkle on your forehead on that one. So what do you think she was saying with that statement, "Thank God for cancer"? No right or wrong here. Anybody want to venture a guess? Why would she say that? Exactly. Not necessarily the more time as such, because it was not going to be the best of time in a way. Why would she want more time? The things that needed to be done yet, the unfinished business. So here you are moving along on this very even keel, and you have a heart attack, boom, there's the point of death. Or you have an accident, a tragedy, like the teenager who got killed last night, boom, dead. Where's the time to take care of the unfinished business? So versus where she was, here she is with the cancer diagnosis. It wasn't going to be boom, it was going to be more. And she needed that time because she had a lot. They talked it out, they reconciled, and you can guess what happened when that was done with the last person. Almost to the day. It was finished. Father Kent says, I've had a really good life. I've done the things I wanted, great family, great ministry, and the final one was St. Vincent's. So he didn't need any extra time. That was going to be a challenge too, because it was not going to be the best time. But if you've got a meaning and a purpose, you'll use it. So that was that part in terms of the question of his life journey. He had done what he needed to. He had lived it well. If you look at a tombstone, Mark Twain now, almost invariably you got the epitaph, right? What are the three things that are almost invariably in every tombstone? Date of birth, date of death, and in between, the hyphen, or as Mark Twain calls it, the dash. The dash. What's the dash? The life journey. Father Kent lived the dash as fully and as well as possible. So we can be happy for him that he was able to so peacefully embrace that he knew it was not going to be way down the road now. It was going to happen in short order. He was very much at peace with the dash, the dash. So we kind of need to be also thankful for Father Kent that he was able to see that for himself. And with that realization, was able to engage in a lot of peaceful letting go. Mark Twain also, what are the two most important days in the life journey for any of us? The day we're born, and almost invariably say the day we die. So Mark Twain concedes, one of the most important of those 2 days is the day we begin the life journey. And secondly, he says, the second most important day is when we figure out why we are here. Boy, that can be a challenge, huh? So we begin the life journey. And once we figure out why, as Father Kent did, why we are here, then we're not so much worried about that last thing that's the death date, because we're dead already if we don't know what life is about. And I unfortunately have to tell you, I have seen way too many people who are dead way before the time that their body shuts down. That's really kind of sad, isn't it, when that happens? So let's be alive and fully alive while we have this time on the life journey. I was asked here, I forget, within the last 2 months, to engage in a point-counterpoint. Women's League of Voters, we're talking about that, and I was supposed to debate people who are really in favor of hastening death. So always called death with dignity, right? We call it that. So this person went first, and I was trying to think, what could I say that would make sense and not kind of get an argumentative sort of thing and say how terrible that is to hasten your death. So I says, why do we keep talking about death with dignity? Why don't we just reframe that and say, how about life with dignity? What constitutes life with dignity? That's the why again, isn't it? Because once we figure out meaning and purpose and live life with dignity and offer the support, then we're not going to be so much concerned about when physical death takes place. So that's what I focused on. And it kind of said a bit of a joke, you might have heard the old saying, it's a good thing that Sam died with dignity because he had to live with so little of it. That's kind of a sad statement too. If people have to live without dignity, how can you be alive without meaning, purpose, and without dignity? So when you're looking at this, I would say to you as St. Vincent's Parish community that we can be sad for ourselves. I had to do that today with a family I was visiting. Be sad and better shed tears for when your loved one is gone. That's a compliment. But can you also take some sense of happiness and peace and joy from the fact that your loved one is now able to live much more fully and much more freely because they lived fully and freely here? So can you take some peace and joy from that? Be happy for Father Kent, even though there is heaviness and sadness in our heart having to say goodbye to him. Also, what Father Kent shared with me was the fact that he knew that his death was going to do what for you as a community? Cause you a lot of anguish, a lot of pain. And that caused some sense of sadness for him. That's always going to happen. When I, again, just to go back with my visit this afternoon, there were 3 of the children there, mother dying. And she really kind of perked up when I was there. I was offering the commendation for the dying ritual, but I was there about almost an hour. And the ritual doesn't take that long, right? The anointing ritual. So there was a lot of give and take, a lot of sharing. And the one thing the son said that his mom shared with him, which he still could really communicate, was he going to be okay? Was he going to be okay? And mind you, this is the son and the daughters who are probably in their 60s and 70s. Can a mother ever get to the point of not worrying that the children will not be okay? What do you think, Rita? Always going to worry. Because when mom dies and dad had already died, what's they're going to make the kids? Orphans. They're going to be orphans. And how can they manage on their own? So Father Kent thought, how in the world can the parishioners at the Vincents manage on their own? I mean, overstating it a little bit, obviously. But he did have a concern for you, is all I'm trying to say. Let me share just a quick personal story regarding how important that is to make sure for the person who's dying that those around him or her will not be in undue pain. I had my sister call from Bismarck, North Dakota, totally distraught. Grandson, which would be my great nephew, Ryan, taken suddenly ill, and a very aggressive brain tumor. And I'll be quick on this. Despite the best efforts of people down in Rochester at Mayo's, Ryan was not going to make it. So I went home the summer that he already got under hospice then. They had fought for about 1.5 years. Just a beautiful little firstborn son from my niece. Diagnosed at 7, died before he was 9. So anyway, I did what I do here. I went to visit, when I say here, with hospice. And I visited with the entire family, and I simply asked my niece and nephew-in-law, could I visit with Ryan alone? Because I know that opens up, they don't feel they have to protect, and the mutual conspiracy of protection going on. So anyway, I got Ryan alone, and he says, you know, Father, Uncle Tom, they never knew what to call me in terms of titles. I'm okay, I'm not scared of dying. I'm ready to go home to Jesus. Wisdom way beyond his tender years. But I could tell there was something going on yet. Could see the pain in his eyes. And so as I kept encouraging, exploring, gently being there for support, started crying more, and he says, Father Tom, I'm so sorry that I'm causing Mom and Dad so much pain. Then he says, would you take care of them for me? Well, that can put a guilt trip on your shoulders, right? That can do a number for you. So I said, I'll do the best, but I knew they had programs there at Bismarck Hospice, hopefully follow up, as well as you do, Rita, with bereavement support. So I went out and I said to my niece and nephew-in-law, you're going to have to give Ryan permission to die. Tell him you're going to be okay. To this day, my niece will tell me that's the hardest thing she ever had to do. And I think that's what Father Kent wanted also for you, that you're going to be okay, that you're going to pick up and move on, despite him not being here. Got 7 minutes yet. Let me move into this arena. What you and I need to realize that is so very, very important for us, and I say you and I realize because we're in a culture that is very counter to what I'm going to tell you, how interconnected we all must be. Because what does our culture emphasize? The rugged individualist. It's all about me, isn't it? It's all about me. Rather than interconnectedness, it's this rugged sense of individualism. The Catholic Church is very clear that one of the things we really always have to focus on is solidarity, which is a fancy word for community, connectedness, interconnectedness. And I think if you and I don't realize that and don't work on that in terms of interconnectedness and taking care of one another, we do so at our own peril. We do so at our own peril. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I'll give an A++ if you can tell me what last Sunday's first reading was from Exodus. Ooh. What were we encouraged to do? What were the Israelites? Say it louder. Love? Yeah, that's a little too general. Yeah, I'm not going to get that by. I used to be a professor, you know. I'm sorry to tease you a little bit. Take care of the orphan, the widow, the alien, the immigrant, the stranger. You were once aliens in a foreign land, right? You expected to be taken care of. And then the singer, if you don't, I'm going to wipe you out, which is the Semitic way of saying, you don't take care of those who especially need care, you do so at your own peril, because we're interconnected. If I don't take care of somebody else, that affects my well-being too. Got it? So interconnectedness is very, very important. John Donne, Meditations on an Emergent Topic, 1864. No man is an island. Heard that one before, I'm sure. I'm going to read it for you word for word. Pardon the language. Do you want me to clear up the language, make it more inclusive? No, we'll do the original. No man, you can say no one, is an island entire of itself. Every man is a part of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, meaning a whole peninsula, as well as any manner of thy friends or thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sent to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. What they would do in the English countryside is slowly toll the bell when somebody died. Question would be, who died? Why is it tolling? So John Donne says, don't ask that question. It isn't tolling for the person who died. It's tolling for those of us who are left behind. That's what it's all about. No one of us is an island entire to ourselves. We are all tied in with one another. You know who else talks about how we're all interconnected and all tied in together? I'll give you a hint where you can find it. In Corinthians, also in Romans to some extent. So put you on the spot. You got the Bible memorized backwards and forwards, Rita? So what am I referencing in terms of this interconnectedness?
The body.
Say it louder. The body of Christ. And it's like the human body. So what's the most important part of the human body? Every part is important, Paul says. Every part of the body, every member of the body must contribute to the function of the whole. So the brain can't say to the toe, hey, I don't need you. Yeah. Good luck, huh? So interconnectedness is very, very important. We are defined by relationships. We are defined by connectedness. So if that stands to reason, if I'm defined by my relationship and that person dies, then what happens to my identity? No one is an island. Even if a little clod of dirt washes away, Europe is lessened. So my life is lessened by that. I've lost a definition of myself. Are you hearing how important that is? So it stands to reason why you feel less defined as a parish here, because Father Kent is gone. Your life as an individual and your life as a parish is diminished. So now it leads to the very difficult question. If I'm diminished, then how do I get back to connectedness? The word that I had given to me, and I have to tell you it's not original, was actually someone I was working with in bereavement that got me onto this. When my loved one died, it was like a part of me was torn away. A member of my body, an arm or a leg. It was even worse than that, she said. That word, dismemberment, is a tough word, isn't it? But that's what this woman said it felt like. You've probably heard it before. Part of me is gone. So if this is true, how do we get it back together? So what's the opposite word for dismemberment? Rememberment. Remembering, right? You brought it up in your comments. You, I'm sure, were sharing in your group. Don't minimize that. I don't think I've ever been at any death, and it's literally now probably in the thousands. How many have we cared for? It must be pushing about 100,000 right now. So I can't begin to give you numbers, but I can tell you this. Almost every single time the death occurred and families gathered around and they shed the tears, they realized the pain of saying goodbye, what's the next thing they do? Reminisce and remember and laugh and tell stories and this and that. That's how they're connecting again. The power of memory is not to be minimized. And that's what is so insidious about this COVID thing. And I heard you say that, one of you back here, that what has COVID done? You can't get together. You can't share stories. You can't have the meals. That's when the healing takes place. So that's why I say it is so insidious that we have to go through all of that. I don't know what the solution to that one is, but it's not healthy. I think we can easily enough say that. So, quote here from Cicero. I had to share it with Rita earlier. The life of the dead is placed in the memory of the living. I'll repeat it. Cicero, Roman poet, writer. The life of the dead is placed in the memory of the living. The life of the dead is placed in the memory of the living. So as we conclude this evening, we can stay a little bit if you want to react and interact and ask questions here. So it's a time to remember, a time to put things together again. I'm thinking your group discussions had an opportunity for that tonight. We're about to celebrate the Feast of All Saints coming up, and I think we're going to use that, obviously, rather than the Sunday liturgy this coming November 1st. We talk about the three levels of the church, the body of Christ. Can I make a test question again? What are those three? Did you got them memorized yet? So Sunday we're going to celebrate the church triumphant. All saints. These are people now transcending the body, and they're celebrating life in all its fullness in the mansion prepared for them. Then the other level is, in the Catholic Church, Rita, we believe in those who didn't do enough work here on earth. They get extra time because God is extra merciful and compassionate, purgatory. So that would be the church suffering yet. But where are you and I? I don't like the phrase, but I'll use it since it's the catechism, the church militant. We're still working at it, folks, aren't we? We're still all working at it. But hopefully we can do what Mark Twain says. We can make that dash, that life journey, the best it can. Because I think we can all agree that Father Kent really did the best he could with that dash, that life journey. So let's work at it. Let's continue to find meaning and purpose. And then when we're done, then we do what? We transcend the body. And I'll conclude with, I think I had at the workshop. Come on up. This is my final line. This is another patient, and again, I have learned so much.
Another person?
Pardon me?
You're going to talk about someone else? I'm sorry.
No, another story, and then I'm done. What am I missing here?
She
thought you were done.
you were done.
I'm never done. This will be less than a minute. I promise. I only went over 2 minutes yet.
Oh, no.
Well, this kind of a nice wrap up. So I got to know this woman quite well, and actually was a member of out here. But no, the daughter was. I shouldn't give too much away. She had moved in from out of state, and so she didn't want to connect with the parish. She wasn't capable. So I provided all the sacramental ministry. Came time for her death, where she imminently dying. I got called to the home by the daughter to provide what I call the combination of the dying ritual, the anointing for healing, not anointing for sick, cure. So I did that. The daughter there, granddaughter, and a great-granddaughter, 4 generations of women. And as I had finished, it was obvious the patient was going to die within hours. The daughter was distraught, and rightly so. Saying goodbye to mom was difficult. But then the granddaughter went over to console her mom, and I just stayed. I didn't want to be intrusive. Stayed in the corner for support. Granddaughter says to her mom, "Mom, it's okay. Grandma's spirit has outgrown her body. It's time for Grandma to let her body go." Think about the beautiful theology in that, in just such a nice, common way of saying it. Grandma's spirit, who Grandma is, has outgrown her body. It was not functioning anymore. It's time for Grandma to let her body go, and for who Grandma is now to go home to heaven. That's what happened with Father Kent, didn't it? His body just was not serving anymore. It was time for Father Kent to move beyond the body that was so compromised by cancer. So let's take joy in the fact that he's there. And I always like to tell a patient, like I did today, now remember, when you get there, don't lock the door. Because we want to get there too, don't we? We want to be a church triumphant. Now you can come forward.
I want to thank each of you for coming out on this rainy, rainy night. I want to tell you that in the gathering space, Rita has brought materials for you to take home so you can stop by and pick those up. Also, thanks to Teresa and Chris, and most especially Father Kent. We also have for you a collection of Father Kent's favorite homilies that he wished to gift us with. Finally, we're a small group, but we'll do real well. I want Father Tom and Rita to stand, and we're going to sing our blessing, please. We'll try that. you're certainly welcome to.
You want to do the closing?
We walk by faith and not by sight. No gracious words we